Okay, hello everybody. Welcome to another session of the Global Foresight Summit. We have for this session with us Tanja Schindler. She's the founder and guardian of the global community Futures Space. And since January of this year, she's also the vice chair of the board of directors of the APF, which has been an integral part of the organization of this Global Foresight Summit this year, together with World Futures Review, Fast Forward. So we are really happy to have you again with us. Yeah,
thanks for having me. Thank you so much. Great to be here. And yeah, welcome everyone to this session where I want to tell you a little bit about stories from 2050. And this is an EU-funded project and another activity that I'm currently doing. And yeah, this project is almost done. So first of all, let me introduce a bit of the team. So I had the project lead within this project funded by the EU, together with Graciela Guadalbena, who was one of my core team, and we developed most of the methods being used together. Then we have support through Foresight and Jana Lindgren, and we had 6 experts from our core team and the consortium Foresight On Demand, which was Eric, Giovanna, Matthias, Radu, Tati, and Ulrich. But what was this project about? So we are all made of stories, and I was really intrigued when I saw the idea for this project, where the EU really wanted to go and look into narratives and to different ways of how we can perceive and imagine the future. So the goal of this project was to create, collect inspiring and thought-provoking imagery and narratives to support and develop the vision of the clean planet for 2050 and the implementation of the European Green Deal, so that we could better understand the challenges and opportunities of the future and create a healthier, fairer, and more prosperous and resilient Europe. And with this project, we really want to tap into participatory futures. There are multiple other streamlines currently happening within the EU where different scenarios are built. Also, we heard Ana Jesus this morning, where she also told about the ES scenarios. So there are different really founded scenarios. So with this project, we wanted to go crazy and wild, and we really had the wild card to do that. So the timeline for this project was that we started in January to March to first review some of existing stories and created a project platform where people could share existing stories and ideas they had about the future of 2050. And we broadly invited not only people from Europe, but globally to participate, also how the world does perceive Europe and how we can foster sustainability together. So in March, we had then a participatory process where we introduced future rooms, which were workshops to 2 different time zones. And we kind of took everyone on a journey to explore the future in a different, really creative and fun way. And I will tell you in this short presentation how we did that. And then we had a storyline design workshop where we help people, what is the essence of a story and how can we break this down and create it? Currently we are working on the finalized stories to write to create images so that in June we can create a publication. But there are different streamlines and people can still participate on a platform. And let's dive into it to see how this goes. So it was really for us to start an exploration beyond the horizon and to lose a little bit from the approach from just looking from the present to signals and trends into the future, but rather make a big jump into the future and imagine what would happen out there and then bringing it back into the present. So therefore, we invited the communities to participate in sharing existing stories, images, movies, scenarios, anything they felt inspired or provoked to think about a sustainable Europe or world. Then we had a discussion forum where people could exchange and discuss those shared stories. And then this participatory approach where we really host a workshop and people from all over the world can have a conversation about the future, sustainable future of Europe. This was like in collaboration rooms where we split into up to 6 different breakout rooms, following up through different storylines. There were also possibility to co-host other events. So we did a few Twitter and Clubhouse talks and shared and invited other communities we were aware of. And then it's writing and co-writing stories, where we reached out to professionals or creative writers who helped us to finalize the storylines created and co-created by the community. So sustainable futures, this was a large topic, and I know a lot of times when we think about the future, and this is a lot of what pictures are perceived. It's like a technology-driven future, some green around, green cities, and we really wanted to go a different way and away from those current images that are creating. So we had 3 different parts to create the story about a clean planet, about climate and zero pollution, the focus of oceans, food and agriculture, energy, and biodiversity. We did with the internal experts a weak signal scanning. Then we invited the external community to share existing stories, and we had the workshops and new storylines around 5 different areas that I will explain you. This is an infographic of how we structured the process. And you can see that we had 3 layers. We started on where we left with the collection. So the internal project team started on a research and a social media analysis. Then we had the project platform. We invited communities to share, and individuals, of course, to share their stories about the future. And then the future rooms, the workshops, where we had a narrative. And then we layered the topics of biodiversity, oceans, climate, and energy, and agriculture and food on top of that before we went into the story creation. And for the story creation, we then also approached 3 different pathways. In the middle, we had the open community. So people could just go to the platform, pick a category like science fiction, eco-central, or playful, choose one of those topics, sustainability topics, and then hand in a video, a comic, an image, a story. And we were planting for everything submitted, donating to plant a tree for that as well. And then with the experts, we went a different approach where we used the community input from the future rooms and looked at the more plausible items that have been created, went through a 3-horizon method, a stakeholder analysis, and a backcasting to come up with heroes' journeys, as we called, a challenge that had to be overcome. And the yellow stream is the workshop with the community, where we really went wild, went to different planets, used very fictional approaches, come up with personas and characters that maybe even nature or really made up. Had the empathy map, though, how those characters would, on those new worlds that we created, collaborate, and then guided through a storyline workshop so that at the end we had like a day in the life of this character. But let's break this down. So the collection was, as mentioned, we did a desk research and we used social media analysis and some AI tools to collect those weak signals. They have a starting point of feeling what is out there, what is the edgy points we want to start with. Then we created the project platform. So feel free to go to storiesfrom2050.com. And here we invited people to share their existing stories about science fiction, future commercials, and emotionals, before later then we introduced them and asked them to create their own stories. And thirdly, the KickOff Workshops. So here we enforced the narrative and we went to a vision and exercise where we basically told our planet Earth had become uninhabitable, and therefore you've been sent on a space mission to explore a new planet. I need to find out if this planet is inhabitable and what the circumstances on this planet are. So we had a small story building around this. I'll show you a bit later, but basically we framed those 5 worlds in 5 planets based on an element. Earth, the first planet, was called Earth 0.2.0. So little bit similar aspects to our Earth, but focusing on food and agriculture, had collapsed and had been dry, but there's hope. Then we had Fire. Planet Fire was all about energy, rebirth, destruction. It was a little bit more dystopian than the others, but also really had some amazing conflict and also opportunities with it. Then we had the Air Planet, which was all about the climate transformation, a fast pace and a new mindset. The Water Planet, about ocean, spiritual, peaceful, and resources and circular approaches. And then we cheated a little bit with the fifth element, but we called it Life. And this was all about biodiversity, new beginnings, activism, and actions. And then we sent, in the first workshop, the people to one of those planets. And we used a loose CLA approach to create those worlds. So we gave them the terrain, which was just those 5 to 4 snippets, and a really, I think, 4 to 5 sentences about how this world may look like. And they had to first send us a message after arrival. What would they see? Who would they send back to our Earth? What they would explore and feel. And then in groups had to think about what is the worldview, the nature, the purpose, the mindset, the resources, and what would be created on this planet. And then the next level, they had to go deeper in the systems. Society, technology, economy, environment, politics, and we added habitat and values. So what is happening? How is the society, whatever society is? And then the last part was split into the next workshop, which was about the characters and the storylines. So this was the canvas that we used with Mural, and you can see here, first activity was to read the really short narrative. Then the second activity was about the message from the future. And then you have those two worldviews and systems. And after they created this over a workshop of 2 hours, the last exercise was a pitch. And we asked people, other people from planet Earth, current planet Earth, should visit this Earth 2.0. And interestingly, most of the planets reported back, please don't visit. But not because there's nothing to see, just because they created an ecosystem they were so proud of and they loved of balance, that they said they don't want humans to come there because we believe it will be destroyed. So if humans would visit, just very short, and then they should go. And we didn't expect that without putting much emphasis of this, the really approach was highly on value, on social change, and not only technology driven on this. There were some technology aspects to overcome some of the challenges, but they really created ecosystems. And as a result of those workshops, we then created narratives. And here's a video. I will share the link later in the chat as well, where you can look. You can also go to Vimeo and look for stories from 2050. There it is. And here we showed the whole story of the visioning exercise of how to explore the narratives. And then we moved into the different planets. And the planets are then the result already of the first workshop. How we are in time. Yeah, let me continue. And then if you have time, I can still show that to you later. So as a result for those first workshops, we created enriched narratives. So with the core team, we sat down, we looked at all the things that has been created in systems and worldviews and put this into a story that had characters in it, but wouldn't tell from a character's perspective, but rather from a planetary view. We gave them different names. If the groups hadn't, most of the groups had given it a name. I think this was just one that we gave. And then we put some music under. So if you watch the video, you could see that we played a little bit with different kind of music within those stories to get the feeling of the different planets. And then the next challenge was, what is happening on this planet? So where are the people, the persons, the characters, or what is nature doing? So we invited, after 2 weeks, to a second workshop that we called Storyline Workshop, and we played the music of the piece we created. They could read the full narrative, and in teams of 4 for each planet, again, in different breakout rooms, we sent them onto the world and asked, what would your character be? The theme we gave is the topics that we mentioned earlier about food and agriculture, and how they would interact. So what is at stake around food and agriculture, and how would those characters interact in the empathy map? So here they had to think, what do they think, say, do, and where do they overlap? And once they had a conversation around this, they moved to different steps. So activity 2 was to build up, setting the scene. What's the situation like? Is there a conflict between the characters? Are they collaborating? Are they neutral? And then the third one was the turning point, the journey. They had to come up with the conflict, or what is at stake for food and agriculture. What would be the worst and the best case scenario? And what would they decide on to move on? And what would be the learning journey of each of the characters? And the last step was the resolution, about what was resolved, what is unresolved, what did you learn, and what is next. So it really flashed a lot of information into those storylines. And all of you just seen was only the yellow part. So this input from the second vote, I just handed in 2 weeks ago to story writers and spent the last 2 days reading what they've created out of the story lines they've been handed in from a community. And they really diverse, and I'm super excited once we publish them. But you see, this ended up in a really fictional space, and we wanted to go there, but we also wanted to show how you can bring the fictional space back into reality and make a different sense out of it. So we used the narratives, the enriched narratives, to make a 3-horizon method with the core team. And the pink post-its here basically were the essences of the stories that we believed are plausible to put back into reality and we could deal with. And then we built backwards on the 3 horizons method to say, what is about oceans today that needs to change? What do we see from the weak signals that we scan that leads to a division created on those fictional planets? What are things that we need to keep from the first planet? Or in red, what could go horribly wrong? And then came to the transitional state in the middle, the green post-its, where we looked at, okay, here is something happening. Here's the sweet spot where we can transition from where we are to the vision. And this is where we then draw on further for the storylines. And here for each planet, we created another moral, and we sent our experts from the project again on those different stakes. And they looked at the green transformational horizon, H2, and developed the key themes that could be seen in it. And what would be one challenge to overcome and one opportunity to take, and who would take it. So the middle part is then there will be 2 different stakeholders. I think for one was a journalist and a teacher, for example, and how would they deal with the topic of food and agriculture. And he was a lot about, I think, learning and teaching new nutritions. And we put this lastly into a backcasting exercise where we looked at, okay, when we want to reach this state, how can we move slowly from the future back to the present, and what milestones did those stakeholders had to overcome in order to reach their goals? And this at the end then reached into the hero's journey, which is a specific way of story writing where the hero meets different people influencing him, has to overcome a challenge, has some turning point, and returns back. And this were also then written by some of the experts, and we also sent this out to story writers who haven't been part of the process, but got this mold, went through it, and then built stories on top of that. Well, that was the blue stream. And where we last stream, I also want to invite all of you to still continue. So on the platform Stories from 2050, we're still collecting short stories, maybe just a few lines, some images, some pictures that you've created or that you are allowed to share. Choose a topic that is focusing here on some of the aspects mentioning in the European Green Deal. And select one of the categories, pop culture, ecocentral, playful, and hand in your story. So yeah, as we didn't want to make this a full competition, but rather really give back something to the community. So every story writer could decide if they could get a budget or if they donate their budget. So we grow more trees. And for any story that is submitted on the platform, we also donate to planted trees, because with this project, we also want to put a little stand as well, sustainability as well. And I found this was a nice inspiration and something good to offer in return for that. And yeah, feel free. We also created a Facebook, Instagram, Twitter channel what is now coming next, that those stories we want to visualize with a few visuals, putting this into a brochure, putting it onto the platform where we kind of guide through, similar to a presentation that I just showed you. How do we come to the platform? And then at Foster the EU, that we hopefully continue this project because we just started to creating a great amount of people for the community to drive and continue this. And I think there are always stories to tell. And this would be a nice platform to include into policy making also citizens and people all over the world in those topics. And yeah, feel free. I can also share this link to those different narratives. They're also on our platform, and looking forward to some questions. Let me just close this. Okay, let me see. I think I need to open the questions here. So I see one is, could you develop your concept of worldview in this project? What do you mean by creation, for example? So the worldview basically was, as I said, we used a similar approach like the CLA with the different layers of the litany, the systems, the worldview, and the metaphor. So if you haven't, I encourage you to look into CLA from Sohail Inayatullah, one of the really deep thinking futures methods. And we use this concept to create those worlds. And in the creation phase, in the worldview phase, we used creation as to ask the people what would be created on this planet. So what is the purpose of this planet for the people or species living there, and to create that. Exactly. Worldviews. What if creation and purpose by the patterns by the civil anthropology? Yeah, we really wanted to state those different angles so people would have a broad conversation, not just about technology trends, but also about the worldviews and societal change. And there was a lot of discussion within how we can foster and change the values, because this can be really important to reach some of the sustainability goals. Could you say a bit more about how you expect this work to inform public policy? Yes, a really good question. So basically, as I said, there are currently different pathways that the EU is doing and fostering foresight. So there are up to 3 scenario projects currently running, one of the impacts of COVID, one from the EA about sustainability. And this was a different way of approach to say, how can we invite the society and the citizens to have a conversation about the future? And what seems to be now really maybe some fictional stories, there's really true essence. And I believe that narratives can really change the way we perceive not only the future, but also the present. And just by having a different way of fostering and showing off scenarios by those more creative and even sci-fi stories, I think this can be also a creative input for policy making to discover those conflicts. Those stories will be used for the further input of following EU projects and the policy making. There's a new strategic plan of the EU coming up, and there will definitely be different aspects where this brings us a new and a different light towards how we can see the future. Do you have any insights in creating story online versus probably face-to-face? Yes, I have to say it was an amazing experience doing it online because it was so inclusive. We really had people from all over the world to talk about Europe and a sustainable future, because it's a sustainable planet anyhow. We cannot limit this to Europe. Everything that we're doing impacts the planet globally. So we need to invite everyone to have a conversation of that. But it's also interesting to have the different aspects on it. we got the attention also with this project within an indigenous community of Native Americans, and we invited them and made some special additional workshops to get their point of view and their relation to nature into what we might be missing. And this is, I think, the most work that we really want to do here, is looking at the things that haven't been seen and haven't been told and haven't been heard. And I think, therefore, you have to go a bit crazy. And this is why we especially use this metaphor of moving to space and saying, imagine there's a planet that it's empty. It may has like empty from our doing. And it has just some properties that we gave, and then they could create anything. Whereas if you try to solve climate change here, a lot of people feel shocked and limited and we cannot do it. Whereas if there's a planet with different challenges, or even with just an environment, you could create anything. This really opens up, and is this approach from first jumping into the future and then bringing back the aspects that we can learn from. How could this collective imagination feed actions now? What are some key anchors? Yeah, so what we're doing is launching this booklet and those stories, and we would love to continue this platform and make some workshops where we have a discussion about what is happening in those stories and how can we learn from this, and how can we bring this back to some of the aspects mentioning within the Green Deal and others. So what can we learn from this and to bring it in? When you backcasting how to decolonize futures, namely having in mind food and agriculture theme. No, that was for the different planets. So basically, we had for each planet a different theme. So Earth was food and agriculture, fire was energy, air was climate, water was oceans, and life was biodiversity. So therefore, we have those 5 different streams where we get different inputs for each stories. And we have for each planet or each topics now up to 2 stories, so that we end up with 20 to 30 stories, including those enriched narratives that we wrote about the planets, and build, cluster them and build some narratives to grow from. And of course, then this hopefully can be used when looking back at the European Green Deal and the challenges within it, and may find some inspiration that can be linked. Good. There any other questions? Otherwise, let me type for you in the chat. The link. Can you talk about how to take the ideas of the distant future and help senior leaders see the implication to a time beyond their lives and roles as leaders? Can you talk about how to? Yeah, well, I feel definitely, and why I'm so passionate about futures, it is about empowerment, but it has nothing to do at all about predicting the future or finding that pathway that comes true. But it's empowerment to realizing that the actions that we do in the present influence in the future. And the more that we think about the future and their different possibilities and pathways, and then have this anchor to the 1 or 2 futures, desirable, preferable future that we want to create, then it's so much easier to make decisions today, because we have an idea what our decisions, the impact of our decisions is. And therefore it empowers any leadership in that. But if they want to know which scenario will come true, that is the wrong approach. It's really being comfortable in the uncomfortable, and by learning and evolving those different scenarios that you know, oh, you played so many things through in your head and you explored even weird scenarios and some that frighten you compared to some that inspired you. You kind of like being in a space where you feel comfortable with any event that happened and tries to bring you away from your pathway. But because you always want to know where you're going, you have this anchor, and you're more likely to come with a detour back to create that. And this is what it's all about. It's willing. Last year, I gave a talk about dancing with the uncertainty. And it's really this for me is future thinking. It's being here and being saying, we have this the space of future, which is really the opportunity to create something, and we'll be comfortable with the things that we cannot control, and rather empowering that pathway. You mentioned that we can still submit stories to the platform. I'm assuming that the project will continue living. What happens through the time frame of 2050? I think for this year, we'll definitely stay with 2050, and the platform will be open till the end of the year. We hope that we also get some additional budget to continue the workshops on it. But yeah, please put in more of the stories and everything that you put in within the next 2 weeks. And there's also a chance that that we still print them. And otherwise, yeah, they're there to share. And this is something we're really working on, that the stories at the end can also be used by the participants and by anyone who wants to get inspired from it. What are some key insights from the stories? Intergeneration ethics present in the stories. Yes, I just read yesterday a really cool story about that, and about one group, the youngers, who were not able to eat a specific plant and not allowed to grow, and the elderly who kind of like had all the richness and were not able to die. And there were kind of like both conflicts in it, to see what does one generation needs to give up for the other to empower, but also one that needs to be empathetic with the other one. And I think in times of polarization, where we're at the moment, this is very powerful. And most of the stories had really drawn into going into social contexts. And that's what I found was really powerful. You can do so much more in exploring the future through storytelling. What limitation frustrates you? I mean, if anything, do you wish you could investigate, but obstacle in doing so? Yeah, I think the biggest obstacle is just for people in the process to let go and to be open to create a story that may sound crazy at the beginning and sounds fictional, but that they can see by having this space and going into conversation that it's so much richful and powerful, and they're exploring beyond their normal horizons. And this was one of the main goal of this project, is to really to go to the edges and find stories that haven't been told, and therefore you need to go places they feel a bit uncomfortable at the beginning. But I presented this already within the Horizon network of the EU, and everyone was really engaged. And there was not the question, how can we use this for policy making? Well, they're really curious, and when can we read the stories? And this showed me there is a shift, and this is really, really nice to see that foresight and futures thinking really has this broad field of what it is, and storytelling and narratives is definitely a big part of it. If you did it again, what would you do differently? I would definitely hire a social media manager because there's so much power in social media these days to get out and to invite people who are normally outside of your bubble, but therefore it's almost a 6-hour day job. You need to post regularly, you need to create comments. So we just started basically within 6 months. It's almost impossible to create this large outreach with a small team that we had. So I would do this differently, and then really also make space for story writing, because at the end we had to, we always wanted to hire story writers, but we hoped that more participants would actually hand in their own stories from the storyline development. But the workshop ended because it was too long for us, we thought, to put in the story writing, and then we didn't get this. So I would do an extra space where we just have time to write stories and maybe work in groups together to write those stories as well. Because I think otherwise there's still a little bit that will be lost in between. Although the stories that I read, I was impressed how well most of the story writers picked up what was written on the murals. But yes, more on social media, and really even having a writing session for the stories. Great. Anything else you want to know? So weird, I'm speaking with a tablet on my computer. So on one hand, I also hope that at one point we will be reunited, also in person or in those conferences. On the other hand, they've been so inclusive, and I've been talking to people all over the world for the last 1.5 years. That really inspired me as well for my work, especially for the diverse futures thinking, and to get future stories from all over the world. So that's really great. So let me see. I will watch here if I can drop you the link.
Thank you so much, Tanja.
Yeah, Yura, have to type.
I think we don't have more questions, so not sure if you want to share with them the website. We can share it too if you want.
Yeah. I can put it just here in the chat, and then because I think I'm not logged in here, so I put it in the private chat, and you can just share it later on the platform. Cool.
Okay, so thank you so much for being here, and thank you for your excellent session. Looking forward to see you at some time in person.
Yeah, I'm being around a few more sessions today and tomorrow, and so yeah, looking also forward to the next sessions.
Thank you everyone for watching us. We will be back in 9 minutes with the next session from Gil and Patricia Lastic. So see you now.
All right, bye.